Speak to Nathan, who is a Wolves fan. Nathan, we'll get to all the managerial stuff, but first of all, your reaction yesterday. People saying it wasn't a shock. Did you think it was a shock?
To be honest, I think most Wolves fans could see it coming. You know, you've been talking about, and Flash has been talking about the way we've been playing for the last few weeks. For whatever reason, you know, they're not playing for Solbakken, and it was almost as if they were quite happy to see him go. It was horrible to see. We've watched it at Molineux. We've watched the players sort of very apathetic and very lazy, not chasing the ball down. So yesterday, no, it didn't really come as a shock. Had we been in form, had we been flying, then yes, it would have been. You know, Luton and non-league, but no.
Down to 18th in the table. Is it 4 defeats from the last 5? I think in all competitions. What does that mean, or why is that come about? Because you looked at the personnel on offer yesterday. We talked about that with Doyle and Ebanks-Blake up front, possibly 2, you know, decent Premier League, bottom half Premier League standard strikers.
Yeah.
Why aren't they playing well? Is it the tactics? Is it just they're not playing for Solbakken, not motivated? What has been the problem?
Well, I think as I just said, we watch them at Molineux recently, and it's almost as if they're half speed, as if they're not playing for Solbakken, and you know, you don't like to see a team sort of get together and think, well, you know, if we play badly, we can get rid of the manager, but. You know, it just seems to have been that way. We started the season really well. I think we got up to 3rd at one point. We showed some good form. You know, we were doing quite well. We're winning games, not always convincingly. Yeah. But recently it's been going backwards. And, you know, Doyle came out at the start of the season, said he was looking forward to playing in the Championship because he's playing against lesser opposition who he thinks he can get some more goals against.
Really?
Well, it's not really been the case. I mean, you know, Ebanks looks.
That's not a great attitude to have, is it? As an ex-footballer, Flash.
Well, as a striker, it's a great attitude because he goes in and he has an arrogance and he expects to score every time he goes onto the pitch.
He plays too far wide, doesn't he, Doyle? He seems to run around. Well,
he's a little bit like what we said about if Suarez plays in behind Sturridge. He'll do too much work outside the box and not be in there. Listen, they are top players. Yeah. Ebanks-Blake and Doyle will score goals at any level if you give them the chances in the right areas. But what's gone on there? And this is not just because Dean Saunders has been linked, but Nathan, I saw Dean Saunders first take over at Doncaster, and when he did, they so emulated what we're seeing with Wolves at the moment.
They're tumbling, yeah.
They were a disgrace. They weren't playing at half pace. They weren't closing down. They lose the ball and then not chase back. They were like playing for themselves. They were individual, and it took him, say, 6-7 months. And now they're second in the league. They win home and away. Yeah. They score goals every week. And I tell you, I keep going back to it. I can't believe McCarthy left. I really cannot believe it.
Let's get your thoughts on that as a Wolves fan. What did you make of that whole situation? Because we don't know what happened. Do you reflect on it as a horrible? It was emotional at the time, wasn't it? Because it wasn't like Wolves really wanted to sack him. It was like they needed to do it, and it wasn't a sort of cutthroat decision. But what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, he still had the fans back, and it was the afternoon when we got beaten by the local team, Sandwell Town, West Brom, 4-1. It was a horrible day, but no one really expected the aftermath to be McCarthy to go. Now, I come on the show, I think, on the day it happened and said, you know, I was shocked and horrified, but hopefully, at the time, you know, we'll get some new blood in, get some impetus into the dressing room, and, you know, we can kick on and maybe starve off relegation. As it were, you know, they offered the job supposedly to Bruce and Kerbishley and Walter Smith, and then ended up giving it to Terry Connor, who, end of the day, lovely bloke. You know, I've met him a few times, really nice chap, but he's a great coach. He's not a manager. He's not a leader of men. Yeah. And, you know, we just tumbled out.
14 games without winning the Premier League towards the end, wasn't it? Or something like something similar to that.
Yeah, but you could see he was like a rabbit in the headlights. Yeah, I mean, he was nervous, but what he was also, he was a go-between. And because he was probably the stabilising influence behind Mick McCarthy. Yeah. Mick McCarthy, he's coming at you, all guns blazing, good cop, bad cop, say what you like.
Similar to Brian Kidd at Manchester United, because he was very much the player's mate, wasn't he?
Very much so.
And it didn't necessarily work for him as the main guy.
And you have respect. And you have respect for Terry Connor because he's a nice man who knows he's a footballing man and he knows what he's talking about. All of a sudden, Terry Connor's been put in a position where he's got to dig people out. Yeah. That might not be his forte.
It's a hysterical business, this football, isn't it? And to be fair, someone's great for 2 minutes and they're horrible if they get a couple of bad results. But Nathan, what do you think of Dean Saunders overall as his candidacy for the job? Because he's had a great time at Doncaster, but he's still a sort of a relatively, I know he's been at Wrexham, but a relatively inexperienced manager at a club of the stature of Wolves.
Yeah, I was just saying to your Hatters fan there in the office that...
He's been chatting a lot today, hasn't he, to be fair? He's full of it.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Talking to anyone that will listen.
Wolves fans, on the whole, you know, they're a very fickle bunch, and they wouldn't be happy with whoever we brought through the door. You know, if Mourinho come through, they'd go, well, his Real Madrid record hasn't been horrendous. So, you know, I was on Twitter last night as soon as this broke. I was on for about 3 hours chatting to fans, and there was a very low number of people in support of Dean Saunders. But for me, you know, he's well known in the game. He's got good connections, I think. Yeah. And as Flash just said, you know, he's turned it around at Doncaster, and they're flying at the moment. What Solbakken brought with him when he come in was lots of negativity. He just had a dreadful time at Hamburg, you know, and he was very flat, very low, and I think he brought that with him into the team.
Yeah, he's experienced Solbakken. He had a decent CV, which is kind of a lot of times we're ignorant, we're interested in Britain, and we say, oh, who is this guy? And they had like cameras, obviously 24-hour news channels, cameras outside the ground, and the players were saying, we don't know who Solbakken is. But there must be an inspirational factor of having a former Wales international, a former striker in Dean Saunders, almost won the Premier League with Villa in the first ever season of the competition.
Yeah, and that's what will get a massive response out of the likes of Ebanks-Blake and Doyle, because they'll have someone telling them what to do. And no disrespect to Ebanks-Blake or Doyle, he was a proper centre forward, where work rate came first, his skill, his goal scoring came second, and they were top of the charts. Yeah. So when he opens his mouth, they're going to listen. And listen, before he even goes in there, if he goes in there, we're talking about Ebanks-Blake and Doyle can win any game for any team in that division. You start getting them spiced up again, and listen, there's a long way to go.
Well, what do you give him? 18th currently. I mean, I suppose nothing's out of the question in the
Ipswich
Champions.
did it, Palace did it.
Yeah, I suppose it is. But Nathan, is there a sense that you'd give him a season just to stabilise the club and perhaps go full whack next year?
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be honest, I'd have still kept Solbakken on for the rest of the season, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked.
They're worried about relegation, presumably, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think Solbakken, you know, whether he hasn't got the knowledge of the English game or whatever it is, you know, it obviously wasn't working out. With Dean Saunders, you give him till the end of the season to see if he can, you know, keep us stable, keep us in the division. And, you know, as Flash says, the playoffs aren't that far off. You know, a few good wins together. Look at Reading last season, you know, I think they were rock bottom at Christmas. You know, went on an incredible run and won the league by a canter in the end. So, yeah, it's not out of the question we could scrape into the playoffs. But even if we don't, I think, yeah, you give him this season, give him a couple of transfer windows, and see what he can do next season. Hopefully, because of his respect in the game, he'll get a better reaction from the players, who, to be honest, should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. The way they've conducted themselves over the last few weeks, the way they've played. You know, if I was a Wolves player now, I'd be disgusted with myself.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. You mentioned that about the players and the manager situation as well, because Brian McDermott, he did mention Reading there. He says, you know, he's been riding high in the next manager to go markets all season, despite what he's achieved at the Medeski. Does there have to be a sense of perspective with the whole situation that's happened at Wolves with sacking Mick McCarthy? Perhaps you have to think relegation from the Premier League isn't the end of the world, but perhaps dismantling your whole team and throwing it completely off kilter is the worst thing.
But and also, let me come in there, Nate, is that when you get a manager like Solbakken, who was basically a dead man walking as soon as they started going on a downward slide. Players are the worst to take liberties. Their foot comes off the gas because they know that they're going to be there longer than the manager. Yeah. As soon as you have a manager that comes in and stamps that out, and all of a sudden the players looking over his shoulder, and you have a lot of competitiveness for places. Yeah. You have a will to win, and it comes from your leader. You're all rowing in the same direction. I've never seen anyone foul.
No. A bit of collectivity needed there. Nathan, wonderful to speak to you. It's been a tough weekend.
Good
you
luck,
won't
mate.
be going to Norwich in the fourth round of the FA Cup. It will be Luton. But we'll wish you the best of luck, and we'll hopefully speak to you again very soon,
mate.
sir.
Take care. Cheers.